I need it in order to make straight lines. I would advise you to bring yours if you want to help out. I always have, somebody left behind a, what's that called again? A chamois last class, so I'm using that. But all I'm using at this point is my compressed charcoal and my vine, but I'm gonna start out and do most of my drawing in the vine. Got it? Okay, all right. What's that called? A skewer, but it's also called a sighting measuring stick. All right, what's the first thing that I do? I'm going to draw a general gesture of my subject, just to get something plotted out, because it's really, really hard to start a drawing without something down. And I want to kind of plot it in a place that looks pretty good compositionally. We will get to thumbnails a little bit later, but this is just sort of a start. All right, once I have a gesture down, what I want to do is I want to decide what my home base is going to be. And my home base, and that's the floor line, by the way, my home base is going to be what? The thing that's closest and largest to me. It's not going to be the bucket, it's going to be the box. All right. So without moving my chair or my feet, and I had a lot of you like tape your feet, like tape the place that you stand. And remember that the best way to do this is to do it with a completely straight back and straight arm so that you're about an inch away from actually making a mark. Does that make sense? I have very little movement. I have my entire chest open to the still life, and I'm not drawing over my arm. You see that? Because I draw with my right arm. Got it? All right, so my home base, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually measure from the highest corner to the lowest corner. I'm gonna envision that there's a line going here. But from basically the top, it's very loud, the top of this to the bottom of this. And what I'll do is sitting at the exact same space, so I will measure the entirety of that line. Look at that, not bad. 1 to 1. Notice how close I'm sitting to the still life, right? So I'm gonna keep my thumb there, and that would be the revision that I make. And I am pretty good with that 1 to 1 ratio. I don't have to size it up. Got it? Okay. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is kind of regroup that, and I'm gonna create what's called the envelope. And the envelope is where everything is confined within. So that box is going to be confined within the envelope that I make it. Then what I'm going to do, and I'm not actually going to include that little dangly bit. Usually I would, but it's not such a big part of the shape and scale of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from one side to the other in the width in order to establish my envelope. I did not move my chair, you saw that. And I've got a what ratio? What's my ratio again?
1:1.
1:1. So that's my measurement, and that's how wide it's going to be. So I'm going to take my measurement and make a little mark, and I've got some revisions to make, don't I? Now, I can stop at that envelope and then just start doing that box. And generally, I would. The other option would be to move on to the other envelope, which is for the other subject. So you can do this in whatever order you want, but I'm going to just kind of end at that envelope. It's at this point, though, I say, okay, well, I don't really need the rest of that information because it's going to confuse me, and so I'm going to take it out. And I'm not going to spend time erasing it, but what I'm going to do is commit to that envelope and not moving out of it. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is probably the longest corner that's closest to me. What's the longest corner? This one, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure that. And I'm going to plot it down around about where it should go. It's that long. Now I may have to move it over from the corner because I haven't measured the distance here in order to know how wide each plane is. So I'm going to measure that distance here. And I've got it spot on. I don't need to change it. So I've got my corner, and I know where that corner ends. So I'm going to firm it up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the angles. And so the angles that are closest to me are going to be these angles, boom, and then the bottom angle. You got that? Now, just as a reminder about your angles should essentially mimic exactly what you have on your paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little dry one there first. And then what I'm going to do is with that straight back and that straight arm is basically move it over and check my work. And I might have to make a couple of revisions in order to make sure that it's correct. And I feel good about that line. All right, I'll do the same thing with the other one. And remember, straight glass that I'm pressing against, I'm not leaning in. You're my checker there. And it's a really, really high angle, isn't it? Check the work, make sure it's right. A little lower. And I can feel pretty good about that. I'll do the same thing for the top, because I know where that corner ends. And I extend my lines into space. Why? I know it's tiring, guys. Lunch is hard. Why do I extend my lines into space?
To make sure everything looks accurate in the end. You have those guidelines in case you need to reduce.
Yeah. Everything is going to converge at one point when I learn perspective. And if I don't see that as evidenced on my paper, I'm more likely to miss mistakes, aren't I? So that's the first thing. So I've got this side, and then I need to do the other side, and I can pretty much presume it's going to be something like this, but I'm going to check it anyway. And it's actually a little bit higher than I had it. I'll firm it up. And I've got my box. Presto changeo. I can measure for this if I want to. I can cite all of this, and I would absolutely cite all of this. But at least I've got a place to start here. It's from here that I'll say, okay, where's that bucket going to go? Well, I'm going to sort of plot out that bucket and just give me something to respond to. But the problem is that bucket just barely goes over here, and I don't know how wide it is. So what I'm going to do, and notice the flare, how it gets big at the top and small at the bottom. It's very slight, but it's still there. I'm going to measure that bottom based off of this tiny little overlap here. And then make that as a revision. I need to go a lot smaller. And because I need to go a lot smaller there, I also need to measure how high that goes. How high the entire thing is. It's only that high, so it's a lot lower than I had it. And it might get a little bit bigger, and that's something for me to resolve as I go. I'm going to have a million ellipses here. And remember, all of your ellipses have an axis down the horizontal end, and you're not going to forget all of this transparency that needs to be in this in order to correct the work. Okay. It's from here, so this is how you do organizational line. What do I have? I started with a gesture. One, gesture. If you're going to write anything down, write that down. One, gesture. Second part, develop the envelope or the square that your subject, your main subject fits in. Your homework fits in, your home base fits in what's called an envelope. You draw that envelope. The subject only fits within that envelope and doesn't really go beyond it, okay? Once you've got that envelope, then you can measure the corner nearest you or the longest edge nearest you. Once you've done that, then you're doing all of those relationships and all of those angles. So you're citing all of your angles, and once you've established at least a general framework for that subject, transparently, extending the lines into space, sighting and measuring accurately, then you can move on to the next subject. Now, what's easy about this is from here, and I feel pretty good about that. From here, I can start drawing all the other things in the room. The easel that's directly behind it. And now that I know how to sight and measure, I can do all of that stuff now and actually get it in accurately in terms of scale and proportion. Y'all get me? From here, and this is the one step we didn't really talk about, what we're gonna do, using our compressed or our vine, and I'll just use compressed, or your charcoal pencil, is when I do the contour. So you have to make sure everything is correct and it's falling off of me here. If I have a straight edge, I should really be able to, if I'm working from my shoulder, be able to make a fairly good line and straight edge using my shoulder. And you're gonna get some extraneous lines. Get over that, that's okay. You're working in charcoal. It's meant to do that. Or I can use a straight edge and make it a little bit more graphic if I want to. Does that make sense? But you really can't have any mistakes if you ever use a straight edge at all. It's from here that I can make everything else stand out in a nice, beautiful, nuanced, varied contour line without having to erase all this wonderful information that I have that is essentially the pavimento, the pentimenti. So I don't erase all of that. I'm gonna leave it all. I want you to make an incredibly architectural drawing of your simple subject, and then once you've got that simple subject, work around it. Try to include the thing in the space. What's this on the floor? Does that give me an accurate and very dynamic perspective? Absolutely. Are there easels in your iframe? Okay, start to work out from that home base once you've got that home base down. And then that's the cherry on top, that beautiful contour is slow, steady, and varied. Any questions? That's how you do it. One, quiz time. One, what do I start with? Two, what do I do? Create an envelope by doing what? You're measuring the length and width of your main subject. Then what? Measure the closest corner, the length or the width, depending on what it is. Then what? Use logic. You sight your angles. Good. Sight your angles, your main angles. And then what? You draw from there. You're sighting and measuring and checking your work every single step of the way. Now that you know how to do it, employ it. You ready? Thank you.